Well, here on the National Curriculum, we always appreciate it when our hosts try and promote the show in advance on their social media channels. And I can't help noticing that one of our co-hosts tonight, Nick D'Urbano, has gone ahead and tweeted at TNC Football into Milan at 10:30, feasting. Sweet summer child. Nick, how do you expect we're going to be done by 10:30 p.m.? Are you learning anything from history? I'm not sure. But with me tonight, Teo Pellizzeri, Ante Jukic, the aforementioned Nick D'Urbano, and for some reason looking like a 70s porn star, Joey Lynch. Good evening, gentlemen.
I'm Rick Boogs. It's my tribute to Rick Boogs.
Joey, have you been watching A-League or just pumping iron this weekend? I can't tell.
No, as I said beforehand, and before you threw me under the bus live on air, I did not watch any of the late A-League games because it was the only time I could get into the gym today. So I will be ducking out before we discuss those games.
Early exit for Joey tonight. No Nick Stoll. He'll be back next week, I'm sure. But we've got a feast of football to sink our teeth into. 6 Liga men's games in the one weekend and a boatload of goals in the women's matches as well. But first, I think we should start outside of the A-League today because the big structural changes and reforms in Australian football always take precedence. And James Johnson has been continuing his media tour, speaking to Code Sport this week about the National Second Division and youth development. And again, floating the idea of what is feasible in regards to that NSD. Is it a conference system? Is it a Champions League format? Or do we get the proper home and away league that we're looking for? Joey Lynch, you've spoken to James Johnson in the past. Anything new come up for you? Any takeaways from that chat?
No. It was a lot of the same stuff. We need to do X. We need to do Y. We need to do Z. A lot of the stuff that James Johnson has been saying for quite a while now. Really, I guess, I mean, it's good that he's still saying it and that he seems to be committed to it. I think the new stuff to come out of Football Australia in recent times, in recent months perhaps, because you have to look back to some reporting Vince Regari did earlier this week as well, and then a couple of months ago surrounding the domestic transfer system, is that the most recent developments aren't so much that Johnson wants these things, it's that he's now said he's getting pushback from various stakeholders, which adds to the intrigue on the situation. He hasn't shared who said stakeholders are, which would be nice, given that if he believes in these things so much, he should want to get them out there. And these stakeholders, as representatives of certain populations, should have to justify their stances to certain populations. If the people they represent want something and they're standing against it, it would be nice for them to explain why. I think, but really, these, and with full disclosure that I too am in the process of organising an interview with James Johnson at some point in the coming week, so I will be contributing to this. This is effectively Football Australia trying to get in front of the story, so to speak. Johnson, in his interview with Vince Regari, reiterated that Tony Gustafsson and Graham Arnold aren't going anywhere. And the conversation was quickly shifted from this is why we are keeping Graham Arnold and Gustafsson, or this is why Graham Arnold and Gustafsson didn't get it right in their most recent international windows, to this is why Gustafsson and Arnold could never have gotten it right, because look how broken everything is. This is why we need to fix it, which, as I said on this show last week, are two separate conversations. We as a footballing ecosystem should be able to, walk and chew gum at the same time. You can fix the broken systems and also hold your national teams to high standards. It's shocking, I know, but it's true. So that's what's happening, I think. As I said, I'll be contributing to it because you don't turn down a one-on-one interview with the FA CEO, but from everything I've read, nothing new. We just wait for some concrete details about all of these things, and hopefully what will be a full home and away national second division, because otherwise what are we even doing here, Jeff?
Well, I'm going to go to an early touch for Teo Pellizzeri here, lest he be introduced at the 19-minute mark again. Teo, you've been a strong advocate for the National Second Division, and even going as far a few weeks ago as condemning the actions of one Victorian club that you saw damaging its future credibility. James Johnson is bullish on the prospect. He says it's going to happen in 2023. Then again, he also told Joey Lynch last year that we were going to be at the World Cup. So I'm not sure how necessarily if you can hold James Johnson to such promises. Are we going to get a national second division? Are we going to get a proper one, or is it going to be some sort of bastardized version that doesn't give it a chance to flourish? No audio from Teo. Got to unmute yourself, mate.
Hello from the broadcasting professional. I think we can't let. I think too many people want to deliberately let perfect be the enemy of good, and they want to deliberately let good be the enemy of adequate, and they want to let adequate be the enemy of functional, and they want to let functional be the enemy of an experiment. And do you know where I am on this? Let's just experiment, man.
Yeah.
We make so many. We make so many mistakes in this game. Let's make a positive mistake. This is the ambitious pass into the front half without defensive cover behind you and the potential for the ball to return over your head. But the reason I am so bullish is because of Icarus. He flew too close to the sun, and I think that if these clubs coming from underneath fly too close to the sun and they go bankrupt and have to fold, guess what? Their crowds for their Phoenix team will be exactly the same in State League 5, starting over in the 8th tier as they are in the NPL, because you cannot kill off these clubs, and they have shown incredible resilience and incredible ability to survive with no infrastructural support. So let's just let them try. And yes, it may not go so well for the clubs without fan bases or the clubs that have shown nothing but blind ambition. But are we really creating a national second division to be their plaything, or are we building it for the clubs that have traditional fan bases that are here to re-engage the pyramid and reconnect? And when all is said and done, the thing about Pro Rel that is going to improve the A-League is the Rel. Pro's great. Pro's going to engage a lot of people, but nothing actually improves until the Rel is added into the equation as well.
I have to just jump in real quick because Teo mentioned something, and I have to pay tribute to the greatest late night show of all time. Careful, Icarus.
Shout out to Craig
Nick
Ferguson.
Stoll is triggered from afar.
No, but I also agree completely with Teo in the sense that if clubs fly too close to the sun and fail, fine. You know, it's their decision.
Because the thing is, what are we achieving by bringing in MacArthur and Western United? Why? I feel as though there's so much to be gained from just being transparent about having the open pyramid there to go for. It's not going to cure all the ills, but I feel as though too many people are investing the need to cure all the ills into the National Second Division, and that is why good has been the enemy of adequate, and adequate has been the enemy of functional.
Ante, big argument for the National Second Division is increase in match minutes for young players and therefore positive outcomes for player development. Is this all so much set dressing without a greater degree of scrutiny and technical direction from above?
On a base level, hello everyone, by the way. On a base level, I agree with it. I think it's absolutely pivotal that these clubs have more scope, have more minutes, have more matches in an environment that is conducive to improvement on a daily basis, not just let's say on once a weeknight. I am aligned with Teo when it comes to the idea that we've waited so long for something like this, and basically since the foundation of the R-League, this has been seen as something that is kind of necessary, and it wasn't until the FFA Cup that a lot of the Australian footballing populace saw that. separating all the baggage that comes with that. Talking about the fact that these clubs have existed without infrastructures and without support. More than that, they've tried to systematically stop those clubs from thriving, let alone not having support. And they have survived in that respect. I'm absolutely aligned with the idea that trial and error and experimentation is a positive in this respect, because at the end of the day, what great discovery or what great, leap in terms of human progress hasn't come as a consequence of trial and error, hasn't come from a consequence of experimentation. I think Australian football has to thrive within that. to use a empty corporate term, a growth mindset. Australian football needs something like that, and it needs to start finding solutions for problems as opposed to problems for solutions. I will say, however, that none of this will create a betterment for Australian football in isolation, like a domestic transfer system, like a national second division. A lot of this has to happen as part of a whole, or as part of in a global perspective or a total perspective. I'm all for it, and when it will happen in 2023, the only question I have is with respect to the motives of Football Australia trying to push this through for 2023, given the fact that we have seen a separation from the A-Leagues. What is Football Australia's real motivation behind pushing the league so early, or pushing the league through at this point? Sorry, Teo. But yeah, look, at the end of the day, I think it's a positive thing.
Joey, there's been a lot of debate as to who should be in the National Second Division, what criteria should be used to select those clubs, and whether indeed we should have reserve teams, essentially, A-League youth sides, competing in that competition as well. It's not entirely unprecedented in world football. There are second teams from, for example, Barcelona and Real Madrid compete in the same pyramid in Spain as the senior teams do. Where do you come down on this?
In principle, I'm not against A-League youth sides playing in the National Second Division on one condition. They win their way in and are promoted from the lower tiers via the system of promotion and relegation, which it feels like will inevitably occur between a National Second Division and the NPLs a lot sooner than it does the National Second Division and the A-League. My biggest question surrounding, all right, in the event that we want to get youth sides into the second division, and we basically want to absolve the APL of their responsibility to create a functioning youth league by just letting them take over the national second division and subjugating the national second division at the altar of A-League clubs that have not exactly set the world on fire with their youth development in recent years. There's 11 Australian-based A-League youth sides. Who gets in the National Second Division? National Second Division's unlikely to be... It's going to be 12 teams, 14 teams maybe. I don't think it's going to be 16 teams in its first season. What, you're going to have 11 A-League youth sides and one existing side? How does that work? Which youth sides miss out? All right, you might have some sides fall away, like I can imagine maybe a Perth Glory, after all the financial losses they've experienced this year, saying we can't afford to fly a youth side around the country to compete in the National Second Division. We're fine staying in NPLWA. But you're going to have to make, at some point, there's going to have to be a cutoff, and who gets in and who gets out. And once again, we just go back to this system of the A-Leagues having the haves and the have-nots, which has characterized it throughout its existence, the privileged A-Leagues versus the NPL, except now you're creating a tiered system amongst the A-League clubs as well. Maybe there's only enough room for 2 Melbourne-based A-League clubs in the National Second Division, but all 3 of them want in. Who gets in? And that just creates a system wherein we are already compromising the national second division by, haves and have-nots in A-League youth, let alone there is going to be some, level of privilege in terms of selecting its inaugural teams. But I'm not, I don't think anybody can accuse me of, having it out for A-League youth sides, given that there's probably no, major journalist in this country. I'm not a major journalist. Any journalist writing for major publications in this country that has covered the youth league more than me in recent years. But I just don't think, based on their existing NPL form, that many of them would function in a national second tier. And I think you are cheapening the national second tier by reserving certain portions for them, because this national second tier, we could talk about competitive integrity, but it also does have to exist as a commercial entity. It has to attract sponsorship. It has to attract viewing figures. And people can talk about, oh, the A-League brands will boost it. Nobody gave a shit about the Y-League. Why would nobody goes and watches these youth sides playing in the NPL? Why would it be any different in the national second division? I don't see it.
I did see. Go on, Teo. Sorry.
No. Apologies for ducking out for a brief moment there. I hope I don't back over old ground. But Ante asked, about why we're going to have a national second division. I do think the broadcast deals that have been struck in the NPL in recent seasons have shown the commercial potential, both domestically, but more importantly, internationally, for football that is played in a unique time slot at a unique time of the year. And I do think there's an element of Football Australia having their interest piqued by this and wanting to take the biggest names and most recognisable brands, some of which have 50, 60, 70 years of history, and put them all in the same place at the same time, where they're going to have brand identity and following. But can we please just finish the 2022 season first and get through winter without a new variant harpooning the season? Because I go back to sort of April and May of 2021, where if you wanted to feel like it was 2019 and COVID never happened, you went to the NPL, and it was great. And I indulged in it and loved it as much as anyone, but I just desperately would love us to finish a season before we start thinking about the grand plans in place, especially given that I think many of our viewers will have seen Clutch is now bringing all the NPLs under their banner. There's an over-the-top platform. There's a new place to go and watch them all. There are stakeholders that are already heavily invested in the NPL that need a season to be completed, and it's the NPL that is going to be providing those clubs to the national second division.
Teo, steady on with 2022. We're still working on 2021 here in Victoria, remember?
Yes, no, great point.
Bespoke.
Yeah, find a federation, Josh. Find a federation that can do both.
Joey?
I'd have to agree with Teo in the sense that just get through 2022. I don't think you've got that luxury. As I said, the national second division has to survive as a commercial entity as well as a footballing one. If Football Australia is genuine in launching in 2023, it needs to figure out who is playing in this thing sooner rather than later. It needs to figure out a model, and it needs to figure out who is playing in it. And it needs to give these sides enough time to go to sponsors and say, all right, we're in a national second tier in 2023. We're going to need some more money. They need to start, investigating. All right, we're not going up against the dregs of, Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, South Australia next season. We're going up against the best and the best. Who do we go out and sign? You need to give these clubs a runway, because if they get a couple of months' notice, it's like, all right, you're in the national second tier. Your first game's in 8 months. Go out and recruit a team. Go out and get sponsors and do it all. Some clubs are going to fail. And whilst in principle, along the life of the national second tier, I don't have a problem with clubs, overspending and failing and becoming a cautionary tale to others. I think that's what football, as long as it's by the agency of their own clubs and then it's not imposed by anyone else, I'm fine with that. Let them be a cautionary tale. But if we have 5 or 6 clubs in the first year of the national second division falling over just because they were put in a position to fail with zero runway, that is going to potentially deal a hammer blow to the national second division. And people that have let perfect be the enemy of the good, as has been said here, won't take the context into their thinking process. They'll just say, "Oh, look, half the league failed in the first season. We can't have a national second division. We're unique. Piss it off," and it'll be poisoned for a generation. We need to get this right, and I think Football Australia needs to, for lack of it, pull their finger out and actually figure out a model and tell us which clubs are going to be playing in it sooner rather than later.
Well, playing the Teo role this week is Nick D'Urbano, being introduced 20 minutes in. Nick, you want to jump in here?
Yeah, good evening, listeners or viewers, whatever you're catching this on.
Hello from AM Radio, Nick.
Yeah,
fantastic
audio.
It's my AirPods. Unfortunately, I'm coming in. Sounds like coming in from the 60s. But basically,
oh yeah, I mean, geez, I'm racing to spend $500 on those. That's just.
I'll see if I can do some alterations after this. But anyways, just to keep it short and sweet. Look, I've heard a lot of words. As Joey said, I want to see some action. And we heard last year when they said it's going to happen. Oh yeah, it's coming into place, everything like that. We're now 10 months out from 2023. We don't know who's playing. We don't know what the model is. I just want to see something actually happen. Words are words in anything. Actions at the end of the day are the most important thing. And I just hope that something changes. And whether it actually happens or not, I guess we'll just have to wait and see in the next few weeks. Whether Football Australia pull their finger out and do it, that's a whole nother question. Altogether.
Nick, when you decided to look 15 years younger, you didn't need to take your technology back 15 years with you. Now, Ante,
I'll be back.
I know that Josh and the rest of the show wants to move us on, but I was reading your tweets about the domestic transfer system. I very much sympathise with the clubs that are losing the players and want to profit from the fruits of their labour. I think all clubs would love to justify how much they have to pay their coaches, and coaches would love to justify how much they pay for their licenses. I mean, people think that clubs charging fees is the boogeyman. The boogeyman is how much it costs to get a C or a B or an A license. That is the issue. It's not greedy clubs. It's how much it costs when you have to, by mandate, hire B and C and A licensed coaches. Anyway, that's a tangent. Please explain your stance on the domestic transfer system, because I do feel as though it's one of the linchpins, and to hide behind a CBA that's been negotiated with the PFA is a really easy way out. Can't we? What happened to being a united that brings stakeholders to the table for the good of the game? I feel as though to hide behind the CBA is perhaps the greatest dereliction of duty of all the things that we've touched on here this week.
Look, I could spend hours talking about the value for money that coaching education brings in this country.
Well, Stoll's not here. We've got ours. I mean, Super Bowl. What time does the Super Bowl kick off tomorrow? I've got until then.
However, I'm not sure how much of a tangible impact a domestic transfer system brings when the reality that community or domestic clubs can actually sign players for longer than 1 year, because you would have to bring much more contractual layers to that piece, like to that discussion, like superannuation, medical, life insurance. These are things that clubs aren't in a capacity to absolutely fork out for in this current dynamic. Whether that would change within the context of a national second division and, let's say, broadcast, fees from sponsorship, revenue from sponsorship and broadcast, that creates another dynamic and another element to that discussion, and let's say might aid the feasibility of such a thing. But as it works now, this is what I mean by a domestic transfer system not actually being, or arguably not being, transformative in isolation, because it doesn't necessarily change the logistical dynamics of clubs and A-League setups as it stands at the moment. The point that I come back to in relation to both that and the 2022 NPL season, which I personally cannot wait for. Everyone listening to this show or watching this show, go and support local football as an aside. But the thing the thing about this NPL season, it kind of encapsulates what the NPL has represented over the past, since its foundation, essentially, and something that was reinforced with the introduction of the FFA Cup. It has always been a subservient competition, and that's probably going to be the fundamental dynamic of this NPL season. The NPL season is only going to be, let's say, a curtain raiser for the teams preparing for a national second division and the intrigue of who would be, admitted into such a competition. And it's with that in mind that I have to consider how a club's going to prepare for something like this, especially considering the narrative of A-League clubs being outcome dependent and being short-sighted. How do NPL clubs prepare for something like this, like a national level competition? Let's call it in relative terms, because I think there is a very real possibility that clubs would, from the off, try to put bums on seats and not think about the health of the game primarily. And because we've talked about match minutes, we've talked about opportunities for young players, opportunities for young coaches, let alone young players, because they're just as bereft of opportunities as players in this country. I really hope that the clubs who would be admitted in such a competition would be consistent with the narrative that has followed the strategic level decision making of A-League clubs over the past 5 to 6 years, or specifically since the introduction of the FFA Cup, because that's what's really accelerated this kind of discussion. I really hope in a topic or a subject or a dynamic such as this, I really, really hope that everyone has the best interests of the game at heart. That's the one thing I really want. Because I think we all care for the game, but when there's skin in the game, you start to understand who makes what decisions and who makes what kinds of decisions.
Well, I can tell you right now, Ante.
Act in their self-interest, and this is why the domestic transfer system is a really important part of it, because if you're going to give young players minutes and develop them, you need to get something for them when they go up to the A-League. And that just simply doesn't happen at the moment. NPL contracts aren't worth the paper they're printed on or the handshake they're based on. And clubs are basically bullied into giving up players, and rarely do they see the development fees. And even if they do, it's not really worth it. So you need financial incentives here.
This is something I touched on this morning. The A-Leagues are an essential middleman. Why would NPL clubs feel as though they have to give players to A-League setups and A-League teams if they're not willing? I understand that A-League.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
I was saying the whole idea of the youth teams playing in the second division is it's framed as some secondary competition and that is subservient to the A-League, which I have a real problem with.
Yeah. I'm not necessarily against that idea. I'm not against the idea of youth teams playing in such a competition, as long as they don't, get promoted into the first division, because that creates a completely different can of worms. But I think
you're telling me that Lazio and Salernitana is not something we want to recreate here in Australia?
No, but think about, look, this is something that's really close to home. Lokomotiva, and Dinamo in the same division, where you have 6 players from Dinamo going to Lokomotiva. Like it undermines the integrity of a competition. This is why I just hope that everyone has the best interests of the game at heart. And coming back to Joey's point, this is why I would like some transparency from those who are pushing back against such an idea.
Well, I reckon we should move on. We had 6 A-League games and we managed to do half an hour on hypotheticals.
Sorry, 1 point.
Oh, God.
Very interesting from Joseph to say that you wouldn't turn down an interview from JJ instead of requesting an interview with JJ.
It's offered to him now. It's a big shot. Let's get to the A-League, and I'm going to give first dibs on on this game to Mr. Nick
Love you,
D'Urbano,
Joe.
having ducked in and out of the call so far. Take 5, Nick D'Urbano on TNC. What did you make of Melbourne victory 1, Newcastle Jets 2?
Am I coming through okay?
You're a bit quiet, but
Better
continue.
or worse? It's like an eye test. I was like, you're at the optometrist. Better or worse? Okay, better. Yesterday was a lot of fun for different reasons. First of all, we saw the box office Jets for the first time in Melbourne since, the little sizzle reel we saw in the FFA Cup playoff back in November now. It's been a long time between drinks. And my God, that game blew up in the second half. And it blew up afterwards. Papa was not happy about the red card and the penalty. He was very clearly not happy about the penalty. I'm very curious to get your thoughts. When we first saw it, it looked like it was clear as day. It was a penalty. But when we finally saw a replay, and we actually saw it because, we actually couldn't play back. It did look like Bumal went down quite lightly. But in terms of the actual game, the Jets ran over him in the second half, as you would expect when victory went down to 10 men. But the change that I really liked was Pappas recognising how the game had changed and moving Thurgate deeper, making that move of bringing on Bumal and going for it. You don't see enough coaches sometimes going for it and taking the handbrake off. And it was a refreshing change of pace seeing the box office Jets in person, because we see a lot of conservative and pragmatic football and P&P, and it's good to see a team come to Victoria and want to play football. And that was actually a lot of fun yesterday in that sense. But for victory, 4 games in the league without a win. Ante, I'm curious to hear your thoughts. Did we maybe see the start of the season, for some at least in the football diaspora, through rose-tinted glasses, FFA Cup win and everything, and now it's a bit of a reality check? I know they had 10 men, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts even prior to that from what you saw as well.
Okay, I have a lot to say about this game. Let me just say how unfortunate it was that I was in isolation and wasn't able to catch the box office Jets. The one time they were in Melbourne, the first time they were bloody in Melbourne.
They're back on Friday.
But they're back Friday. This Friday. Mashallah, they'll be back, and it's going to be great. However, speaking of the Jets as a counterpoint to the rest of the league, that was something that was very interesting about Mario Arquez starting in that game, and Thurgate moving deeper, and Pena starting on the wing in that game last night, because I think their primary intent from last night's game was to press, because victory cannot play through a press, and that's what made things very look, it's not that they cannot play through a press, but I think there was enough evidence to suggest that they would not be able to play through a press, because there aren't many teams in the A-League men's that play that press high up the pitch. It's probably Newcastle, Adelaide, Melbourne City. That's about it. Everyone else really likes to sit in the mid block. Will wait for certain passes and then try to win the ball in certain areas. But nobody overtly presses, and that was the thing that really struck me about Newcastle last night, and Arquez playing with Thurgate and Grossos in midfield last night, because I think it was as clear as day from the opening 10 minutes that victory just hot potato that ball as soon as at the very side of a press. And that's what makes me look at or makes me interpret such lament over the referee's decision, with a grain of salt, because they had no control whatsoever over that game, even in the first half. They had chances, fine. They were born of the last resort hoof second ball stuff that victory were doing as a result of Newcastle's pressing. However, something I made note of last night, it would have been very interesting to see how Pappas would have responded if victory did not score from that routine throw-in at the end of the first half. Because the goal changes the dynamic of the game, and the goal basically forces Newcastle to come out of their shell in that respect. Pena moves in, Thurgate moves deeper, and it was evident from the first 30 seconds of the second half that Newcastle were going to dominate the ball in this half. and there was like there were slight changes in momentum, and you could see Victory were really struggling to play in that in the first half, and then Newcastle were going to dominate the ball. Berlanti's rugby tackle on Thurgate then accelerates that change in momentum. Then comes, the goal, the equaliser, the disallowed goal from Hoffman, and the penalty. It's a pen. However much Victory Twitter won't like it, it's a stonewall pen. Whether Bumal initiates a contact or not, Hamill is nowhere near the ball. He impedes Bumal's progress. He stops him. It's a pen. But irrespective, I think there was a lot to unpack with that game, and I've received some criticism in my interpretation of Victory. I'm still not going to say anything definitive about Victory, but I have reservations as to Melbourne Victory's ceiling. And they're going to have a high base level under Popovich, but their ceiling is something that still remains to be seen, or at least reaching their ceiling.
Just to touch on the official line, Pappas' line as to why he did that and he made the move he did before the game. Paraphrasing this, obviously, this is going back through an Otter transcript, and we know Otter transcripts aren't always 100%. We haven't gone back and fully transcribed it. So basically, he said he felt that against City, they didn't have enough of the ball, so he wanted to bring on an extra player to help control the midfield. He also said that it was a variety of different factors, freshening up because they're playing a ton of games in a short space of time. And also, as you mentioned, the press. It actually helped organise their press, and he liked Angus Thurgate closer to goal because he's actually scored the last couple games getting in those areas. But he felt that being able to play Pena out wide still gave him enough freedom, but didn't actually disrupt their structure too much. So that was Pappas' official line on it. And you could see it. And in the second half, you just had this feeling especially once Berlante got sent off, that the Jets were going to run over them. You just had there was this feeling like that goal's coming. And then once Hoffman scored, it was disallowed, you knew that initial equaliser, an actual equaliser to count was coming. And then once that one went in, it just felt like the floodgates opened. But look, just seeing as we said, we fawn over how good the box office Jets are in person. But geez, if you guys are a listener and you want to and you're a Melbourne listener and you haven't seen them yet, get there on Friday night. If you just watch football Friday, just get there. It's great. It's great value.
Joey, Tony Popovich was not keen to talk about refereeing decisions after the match or really admit fault in any way. Instead, claiming that Victory's first 45 minutes was among the best halves they've played this season.
Sorry. Yes, I was interested in getting Ante's opinion on that, because once I finished defrosting or, just batting off Tony Popovich's attempts to make my head explode with his mind for asking him questions about the penalty and the red card, he said that it was unfortunate that the discourse would be dominated by discussions of the penalty and the red card, as that first 45 was the best that Victory had played all season. Their patterns of play and the way they went about things were the best that they had gone about it all season. And I have perhaps the question for you, Ante. Why is he thinking that? Or alternatively, why is he trying to gaslight me?
I think it's a combination of both, because Victory were poor in a lot of aspects in that first half. I was in certain points of that game, or in certain passages of Melbourne Victory in possession, I was counting down or counting the seconds as to when they were going to lose the ball. There was one moment where Kelleher, I think it's Guerrier passes back to Kelleher, and I'm counting, when are they going to lose the ball? When are they going to pass out to the other side to Davidson? And when's Davidson going to try and hoof it out or hot potato the ball because he's scared of the press? And when are Newcastle going to retain the ball? It took 10 seconds. And I at the same time, though, there were aspects of Victory's play that really worked, because if you go to their trainings, they practice that throwing routine regularly. like almost every training session, they practice that throwing routine where Margiotta drops in, interplay with Brimmer, get it out to the other side, and to use a footy expression, Falami was on the fat side, and they were able to score from there because they're their wingers thrive in those scenarios. Their wingers need momentum. If they get that first step going downhill, they're going to create problems, and that was something that Falami created as a consequence of the second ball stuff in that first half. But
Could I just quickly interrupt, Teo? What the hell's happening in the dub? You're on mute, Teo.
They've disallowed it. I'm cheering you.
What happened?
I thought Taryn King had equalised in the 94th minute, and then after an interminable wait, all the replays, they've disallowed it. And I think it's for Claire Coelho fouling Jada Wyman because they sent the keeper. So it was keeper on keeper at a corner, then a scramble, and then in by King out of a sea of legs, and they've disallowed it.
Wait, so there's no dub in A-League Women. There's no VAR in A-League Women unless Sydney FC is playing.
Well, I mean, anyone who watched... No. To be fair, anyone who watched the Adelaide-Perth game would have been equally confused. But no, Newcastle are absolutely ropeable, as you can imagine. And Sydney FC now have their clean sheet streak extend to 9 games. But, I mean, watching the replay, I don't think it's a foul. I think Claire Coelho jumps straight up and down. But anyway, I'm sorry to derail the chat, but the box office...
I derailed it, but yeah.
The box office Jets were box office, and now they're defeated 1-0. So.
Speaking of goalkeeper errors, Joey, can we talk about Ivan Keleva?
I just wanted to... Now, I know we had some disagreements, Ante, about whether or not Keleva should have come for Valentino Uel's goal. You say having some information that he's been instructed to stay on his line. If he has been, fine. If he hasn't been, that's a howler on his part. But if he's following instructions, whatever. But on the whole, I'm still yet to be convinced that Ivan Keleva's that good. Yeah, I'm yet to be convinced that his strongest point isn't the vibes.
Let me just clarify. That Keleva's starting position is on the line, not that he stays on his line. Because I think
but
there's something about Pena's delivery, that's
made of concrete.
That's fine.
If he starts on the line, he's staying on the line.
That's fine. But I think but that's why you wouldn't come out either.
Pena's delivery was masterful.
Pena's delivery is millimeter perfect, and if you're on the line, it's going to be hard, one, to come out for that kind of thing, and two, claim it. And Yule's realization in that respect is just as good because he takes it in stride. He understands where Keleva is. That's as well realized a goal as you could have. However, I do understand.
Everything else that he does aside from maybe this incident,
there's an aura of panic about him.
Especially when he gets the ball to feet.
There's an aura of panic about him every time the ball comes anywhere near it.
And his positioning and where he takes up,
That's probably Keleva's weakest aspect. But that's probably the thing about, sorry to profile players, but that's the thing about Croatian goalkeepers. They are really good shot stoppers in terms of reflexes. They're really tall, but their feet are horrible. That's probably, like I came back to this, it's no surprise that Dinamo took a leap of faith in Dominik Livakovic in the way that they did after a player like Keleva, because Livakovic's feet are his strongest attribute. His presence in the penalty area, his ability to claim crosses, his shot stopping is great, but his ability to claim crosses and penalty area presence is absolutely poor. Keleva is actually decent in that regard. He'll in relative terms, he's not flapping at crosses. He's not flapping at corners or free kicks. His shot stopping is actually quite good. But his distribution with feet is a really weak point. At the end of the day, I'm not going to blame Kelleher for Victory's inability to keep the ball. Because you can't play a Broxham Berlanti midfield and expect to keep the ball specifically against a team that is pressing.
Is Kelleher a better option than Matt Acton? And is he enough of a better option than Matt Acton to justify a foreign slot?
Yeah, that's the thing. You know what? You know how I feel about foreign goalkeepers, but I don't think he's of a sufficient quality to justify playing over Matt Acton, for example, or playing, there are quality Victorian goalkeepers in the NPL. Coming back to the NPL, there are good keepers down here.
There was a really good keeper on the bench for the Jets the other night.
Yeah.
Big Mike.
So,
Big Mike.
Has everyone finished with on the grass stuff?
Yeah, let's shift our focus off the field because there are
We've had
ownership
enough.
takeover rumours swirling around the Jets.
Yeah,
have been all week. An American consortium apparently interested, as per the Sydney Morning Herald, led by Brett Johnson and Jordan Gardner, who have interest in a number of clubs around the world.
So my question is the Newcastle we're seeing hiring Arthur Pappas, signing the players they have, playing the way that they are, is it all because they're being forced to innovate because they're a have-not, broadly speaking, in the context of the league? I'm not making the case that ownership could be a bad thing, but it's kind of, I don't know if you remember the Simpsons episode where all of Mr. Burns' diseases jammed the door and it's called Three Stooges syndrome. And I'm wondering if all the various deficiencies are actually a perfect ecosystem of necessity, and out of that, this team that we've all become enamored with and are effectively barracking for because we think they are the Jets doing well is the best reward for the A-League because of the innovation that's been necessary. Could a bit of a safety net actually be a bad thing? And I think that the owners should buy. I would love to see the Jets have long-term stability, but will it nullify the creativity that has been bred?
So what you're saying is the Jets are invincible.
It would be the most TNC.
Could make the club fold.
It would be the most TNC take of all time if we all declared that somebody buying the Jets is terrible.
You know what? On Super Bowl weekend, I think it'd be suitable for us to use an American sports reference. It's like the new owner GM's complex. Like they want to make a splash. Like I absolutely believe
they want their quarterback. They want to draft their guy. They want to get their guy in the locker room.
It's the perfect weekend for it because it's the Los Angeles Rams who are owned by Kroenke, who owns Arsenal, the billionaire who has poured in every resource and left no stone unturned, versus a notoriously cost-cutting cheap franchise in the Bengals, who even this week have been accused of cutting costs on flying their players and staff to Los Angeles for the very Super Bowl they're competing in. Like, for goodness sake, you'd think that if you'd made the Super Bowl and been kissed on the proverbial, you might actually spend a bit of money for once. Anyway,
there's even more parallels. The Rams, too, don't give a shit about youth development. What's a first-round draft pick? Don't need that.
Don't need it.
Sorry to derail it, but I mean, obviously, I'm not being 100% serious, but by the same token, are we confident that one, the sale will go through if the interest mooted is legitimate, and two, Josh, others, what flags have there been in terms of this is hardly utility for the token, but it's also not a slam dunk.
1 year anniversary.
I just wanted to note that the original copy for the Sydney Morning Herald article about this ownership interest included a line that one of the main people in this consortium, Jordan Gardner, had a stake in Dundalk. And I actually corrected and said, I'm pretty sure that American ownership group sold up late last year. And he was the spokesperson for the consortium Peak Six, which owned Dundalk in the Irish League. And they were essentially run out of town amid supporter discontent after they took over a very successful outfit, a club so successful, in fact, that their manager actually got poached to coach the Republic of Ireland national team, which from the League of Ireland is almost unprecedented. and they installed a coach that had no prior professional experience other than a few academy gigs in America, such as the New York branch of the AC Milan Academy. So, that didn't go down too well. And they did get through one, I think, Europa League qualifying tie, which eased the pressure for a while. But the fans eventually got fed up. And, this team that had won so many league titles in a row are no longer competing for such accolades. So it's a limited sample size, and they've got interest in a lot of clubs, these guys. But based on the Dundalk experience, I would be concerned.
Just a small thing. Quickly, it's funny how you talk about Super Bowl weekend and apt references, and they're from a group called Pick Six. Like that just
Peak
goes
Six.
to show.
Peak Six.
Peak Six. Oh, I thought you said pick. Okay, no worries. Anyways, and also, are you trying to tell me that they're going to install Ted Lasso as coach as well? Like if they take over, basically.
He's coaching another. No, never mind.
No, anyways, just to quickly give Pappas's line on it yesterday, Joey asked him in regards to if he had just on his thoughts and if there's any more news. He spoke about long-term stability if they do come in, and he said that if there's news to come out in a little bit, it's sure that it will drop pretty soon. So, he's very grateful to the people who've kept the club alive during this period. But I mean, he's speaking long-term. This club does need new owners. They can't keep being propped up by 4 other A-League clubs right now. So hopefully, just in terms of the long-term stability, we get those owners, whether it's these guys or not. Be interesting to see. Ante.
From what I understand, with news
hold on, are we getting a TNC exclusive?
Yes, you are. From what I understand, of the consortium's plans for the Newcastle Jets, they're no longer looking to move the team. They're going to keep the team in Newcastle. That's a good thing because Newcastle needs a football team. Newcastle, is a football town. Newcastle has a history of football. But with respect to Pappas, I think, having said all that about making a splash and everything everything related to that, I think they would be absolutely inclined to go all in on a long-term project with Pappas as the team's coach. That's what I understand of, the situation at the moment. I think it can work. I think there is something to say about Newcastle under Pappas. If he is in it for the long haul with Newcastle, I think this has the hallmarks of a healthy long-term project. But we'll see. Time will tell. Nothing, to use. We're 52 minutes in for the first wrestling reference, but the thing about football, the only thing that's certain in football is nothing's for certain. Anyway, we'll see.
First wrestling reference is 52 minutes. I've been dressed like Rick Boogs the entire podcast.
Well, that's super encouraging, Ante, because they had initially apparently been interested in moving the team to Gold Coast. Which, Newcastle is one of the strongest.
Can confirm.
It's football country. It's a heartland. We use the term a lot, but it is genuinely
a football town,
heartland and town in terms of the players that have come out of that region. Joe, have you got a bail?
Yes, I do have to bail after this, but before I go, I will say, before I say goodbye to everybody, I want to go around the room. Super Bowl tips. Give me.
I don't even know who's playing, man.
Absurdity. Under 2.5.
What? So what? Like 2-0. Somebody wins with a safety.
Von Miller safety. That's the difference.
Joe, my sincere tip is Rams will cover. I think Rams win. Rams cover.
Yeah. I got Rams win. Rams cover.
Mi dispiace Pakua Frimpong, but yeah, the Rams win this one. Joe Burrow fairy tale story comes to an end, but I think it'll be a close game. And the halftime show.
Give me the box office Bengals, baby.
If there is one franchise which isn't box office, it's bloody Bengals.
All right. Good night, Joey.
Good night, listeners. Good night. Oh.
And we will move on to Sydney 1, Western United 1. this game finally signalling the
The
end
job share's
of the
finished.
job share. It's
Yeah.
over. Finally,
Yay.
upper management have seen fit to grant Max Burgess and Milos Ninkovic 90 minutes on the pitch together in the same game. Hallelujah!
Yay.
And fittingly, they combined for Sydney's only goal.
How much fun was the Max Burgess' central midfielder experience? Like,
I was not expecting that from Corica. I was expecting
yeah.
Steve Corica's hair to grow to his shoulders before I saw Max Burgess in central midfield.
But you know what? We talked about this going back about a month. Going back late last year. I don't think the idea of moving Burgess to midfield is an illogical one or an impractical one, and it's probably where he should be seeing the rest of his career, like going down the line, thinking of him as an Australian answer to Mulder Vasquez. But
I love
that was a cool thing about last night. Like just seeing Burgess do, in relation to starting midfielders in the R-League men's, do really unconventional things. Like I pointed it out last night, watching back after the Newcastle game. We were about a minute in. The ball pops up after a cross from, I think it was Risden. And ball pops up. Burgess sees there's no other defender around him, and he just controls it with his chest and brings it down. In a lot of situations, it's hard not to stress in that kind of situation. Most starting R-League men's midfielders would either A, try to play aerial ping pong, or just clear it into rosette because that's the safest thing to do instead of actually bringing it down in relation to actual and perceived defensive pressure, which is probably the most contributive aspect of playing aerial ping pong or trying to clear. A lot of it is just perceived defensive pressure as opposed to actual defensive pressure. It was good to see them just play football. It was fun.
Do you think this was tactical maneuver just for this game, considering Western United are quite a passive team, or would you expect to see Burgess start more games from here on in?
I think it was a personnel thing with Sydney more than anything else. I think it was just a case of needs must, like it was, let's say, with City against Central Coast. However fun it was and however nice it was to watch Burgess play midfield, I don't think we're going to see much more of it going forward if Sydney have a full complement available.
So if any one of Amini, Yazbek, etc. and so on were available, we don't see that. That's unfortunate. Do you want to jump in?
The job share comes to an end. It comes to an end for 90 minutes, but it begins again. Is it like a contract renegotiation at the moment and just trying to
interim period?
So it was like this 1 week strike. Maybe they went on strike and Coke is like, all right, get out there, the both here. Just quickly, Ante, I'm surprised you don't have the cultural sign when you meant the vote reference there, the cultural freeway sign just at the top there. But just in terms of the performance, just a quick note, Stephen Lustico keeps on scoring. Is he on some record pace right now for breaking, career goals or something? He's just unbelievable. I didn't see too much of the game yesterday, but the only thing that I took out of it was, why are we taking water breaks when it is bucketing down rain in Sydney?
Oh, the ad break, man. The ad break ruins me, man.
Nick, I'm fairly sure it was Joey that left the chat and not me.
So do we have technical difficulties with Teo, so we can't talk about the ad break at the moment?
I think maybe we'll move on. Yeah.
However, sorry to get... Oh, go on.
No, I was just going to say the last thing. Just reminded me of... Joey tweeted the meme yesterday. It's that famous water polo meme. It's like the guy in the water and he's, he's that trick,
But you know what?
It's just a laugh.
Coming back to Lustica, though, it's been interesting to see how fluctuating his performances have been over the course of these 2.5 seasons at Western United. Where you saw that second half of the year, in that first season at Western United, he worked really well. He was getting into similar goal scoring situations, actually, when you think about it. That goal he scored against Sydney, the goal he scored against Western Sydney as well in the bubble from memory. And then in the second, in that second season, playing with Victor Sanchez, they were both kind of lost out there. Whereas this season, with a change in approach, change in composition in midfield, he's become more of what we did see in that second half of the season, or that first season at Western United. It's been good to see. But it was very nice to see the job share break down Western United, because that's been the big thing about Western United. They've been very stout defensively, especially when they get into winning positions in games. And lo and behold, the team that was actually playing football was able to break Western Sydney down, or Western United down. And that was always the question with Western United. How much of that was how well they were defending, and how much of that was the relatively low functionality of teams in possession in the A-League. And we got a little bit of evidence last night.
It's funny you bring up Luštitsa, because for me he's the ultimate chameleon of a midfielder. He's just a sort of adapt to his circumstances. Yeah. He's got a bit of everything. If you tried to pin me down on what his best and worst attributes are, I would have a hard time in summing that up. He's very dependent on context. And I think he can be a really effective A-League player in the right system with the right players around him and the right set of instructions. And when he's given a little bit of freedom to bomb on and, get to the edge of the box and so forth, he can score goals, as we've seen the last few weeks, which, Western United, they're not exactly in plentiful supply. So every goal is crucial. Every goal could be 3 points every week for Western United.
It's true.
The other thing that struck me about this game was Adam Lafondra coming back into that Sydney lineup, and one of his best attributes being the ability to win 50-50s with defenders and not give away a foul. There was one particular passage of play where he just bumped a centre-back off the ball. I think it was Lacroix on the left-hand side, and Sydney nearly scored from it. And I thought back to when I was watching one of the victory games, and one of the club employees was standing next to me, and D'Agostino barreled into a defender, and it was immediately called for a foul. And they said in a very offhanded way, if that's Lafondra, that's play on. And that comment stayed with me, because I never thought about that as part of Lafondra's game. But he does have a way of using his body that prevents referees from actually go. They probably put the whistle in.
He's not handsy. No, he's not handsy though. That's the thing. He's not handsy.
He's crafty about it.
He uses.
The club employee was saying in a way that was like, Sydney always get these calls, but we don't. But it's not that. It's Lafondra, and he has a technique for it.
Yeah, no, he's because you think about his build as a footballer, he's very strong in terms of his core, and he uses he's hard to bundle off. He's got a really good center of gravity, really good balance, a lot of hips. Essentially, now are we going to say he's of a Bruno Fornaroli posterior? Probably not, but he's smart in those situations. He really is. He doesn't use a lot of hands in those 50-50s, all when it's shoulder to shoulder. I think irrespective of that, I think he's a big addition for Sydney, because playing, let's say, Cam Sober and Bahadra up front, it's totally different. Or even playing Bobo and Bahadra up front, it's totally different. Lafondra makes his team better.
And they've certainly missed him. Anything from you, Teo, before we move on?
Do we want to touch on the penalty shout?
Go on.
No, I don't know. I ask you guys, do you want to touch on the? I feel as though I've been speaking about refs all week, and I'm kind of exhausted. I feel like I've talked it through, to be honest.
I just don't really find this stuff that interesting, to be honest.
Same.
Yeah. All right, let's go to Western Sydney Wanderers 1, City 3. The Mark Rudan Revolution off to something of a rocky start. Do you want to start with you, Teo?
Not really. I guess, are we completely unsurprised by this result, in the sense that we know a lot of Western Sydney's problems. Few of them
Yes.
were resolved in this game. There may also quite arguably be a talent disparity, which means that even if Rudan was getting more than the whole out of the sum of his parts, City may have had just far greater margin of error in this game. And in that respect, Ante, did Mark Rudan get any closer to getting more than the whole out of the sum of his parts in this game?
Absolutely not. We saw more
You were
of the same.
particularly irked by the substitutions in this game, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. However, I will say, like, I was saying it in the group chat as well, and I'd said as much on Friday night. Like, I have a visceral dislike for how James Troisi plays his football, and playing him with Petrados creates a lot of dysfunction for a collective in possession, especially in a scenario where a team is going to chase the game. And that was a thing that struck me about Ugarkovic coming off, because that was a thing that because it was the penalty from memory that leads to it was a pass from Ugarkovic to Aquilina. Aquilina loses the ball. I think it's like a 1-on-2 or a 1-on-3. The first two goals were not good from a defensive standpoint. I think that's quite clear. But if you're chasing a game, I don't think you're taking off Agawa and Ugarkovic and Najarine and keeping on someone like a Petrados and bringing on an Abini. It just doesn't work. And we've already seen enough evidence of that this season. I do like Lopane. Lopane is like, give that kid some minutes, man. He can play.
Nick, we're not going to be seeing Paddy Kisnorbo as the next manager of Sunderland after all, after they appointed Alex Neil. No Kisnorbo on the touchline for this one, but what did you make of City's performance?
Florent Berenguer is an absolute goddamn freaking baller and doesn't get the credit he deserves. Like, seriously, I have to eat a piece of humble pie just in myself, because I genuinely wrote him off after his first season under Warren Joyce. But
yeah, but he was being used as a jobbing winger, and he was out of breath the entire time.
I know.
Like,
and
pump the ball in the box, Florent, again. Get up and down the touchline. I can't believe that Warren Joyce ostensibly signed this guy, or would have had maybe some say over signing him, and they had no idea what his best position was.
But isn't the real confusion that Florent Berenguer was such a professional that he agreed to it and didn't push back or throw his lot in, knowing that this is what he was capable of, and that is how he was introduced for a full season?
Well, I mean, not all Frenchmen are enfants terribles, Teo. Some of them are well-mannered, hard-working, low-key dudes.
Look, just in terms of Berenguer's performance, like, just to see a midfielder get that much scope and the way that he makes the other players around him so much better is unbelievable. And we on this podcast definitely not, but the football dialogue and discourse around Melbourne City always is talking about that front three and Marco Tilio and what they do. And that's not taking anything away from Marco Tilio, but God, Florent Berenguer makes this team click. And if he's not there, like in that midfield, they are not the same team. And I know that, against Western United, I know against Western United, they had problems in terms of their whole composition, but Berenguer was like, just carrying that on his shoulders. And just what he was able to do against Western Sydney, to see them afford him so much space was just baffling from a defensive standpoint. Just to give him... you know what?
I will say, sorry, good attack beats good defense. Like, because defending essentially is a reaction. Like, you think about defending in conceptual terms, it's a reaction to what the attack does. So as an attacker without the ball, if you're intelligently improvising, you're always going to get like that little moment of time and space. And that's the thing about Berenguer. Like, when you think about players in that regard and think about good players in that regard, they always seem to generate time. I don't think that's as a consequence of what the defense is or isn't doing. That's just good attack beating good defense.
First yard of pace is in the noggin. So old
correct.
Florent sharing him up front there for City.
I think the best thing that happened for him as well was just that he was given Luna's position and was given the first crack at it, because last season he wasn't their main guy. That was Luna's position. He got his opportunity late in the season when Metcalf went on international duty, and they both played the finals, and God, he was great. And I hope that he keeps getting the credit he deserves. But just in terms of City as a whole, I mean, they're starting to get back to Melbourne City with Skrieg banging in the goals. I mean, I've got to give Matt Leckie credit.
Corn
the
fry.
first header was
Dead balls.
good header. And Aiden O'Neill's ball, I didn't know he had that in his arsenal. So kudos to him for weighing that hoof perfectly for Leckie. So I'm curious to watch City again in 2 days' time against Adelaide. I am. I am very curious to see.
I can't wait for the Jets game on Friday.
That's also... This week's going to be an interesting week.
Yeah, like, you know what, because
interesting week.
it's... When you talk about the City of last season, the interpretation that I have is like that they're kind of winning without being really convincing. Like, you think about that game, and they will absolutely carve you up in transition. You know, they scored...
Look at what they did against the Jets.
Yeah, like, and that's the thing. Like, they're not really going to, you know, play you off the park, essentially, but they can win games in moments. And, you know, you think about those opening 2 goals that they scored, dead ball. You think about the penalty that McLaren misses, transition. You think about the goal that's scored for 3-1, another, like, you know, broken phase of play. It's really... City are weird, but they just have enough quality to be able to give them games.
Let's move on to Wellington 1, Adelaide United 1. On the 20-minute mark, Walter Sandoval, the new Mexican arrival, taking a break from giving the ball away every time he got it in the first 20 minutes. He tuck one into the bottom left corner. Beautiful finish it was too. But they couldn't hang on. Bernardo Oliveira, one of the smallest players on the pitch, scoring a back post header in the 92nd minute. What did Wellington do wrong here, Ante? How did they fail to manage this game and see it out?
Where they failed to see it out is the fact that they didn't put the game away earlier in the first half. You think about the chances to Sandoval, you think about the chance to Piscopo especially at the end of the first half. They had the ability to put the game away because Adelaide were horrible. Like, I spoke about how I have a visceral dislike for how James Treacy plays his football. I have a visceral dislike for Isaias as one, how he plays his football, and two, a footballer. Like, you think about how they copped that opening goal, you know, the need to force that pass into Mork, you know, the idea that they had to bring in Ibuski and had to bring in Lachlan Brook because they needed goals, you know, but, you know, their midfield sucks. Like, they are really, really bad. And the one thing that really upsets me about Isaias, and I mentioned it today watching it back, it's like, he is low-key one of the dirtiest players in the league, but gets away with it because he talks his way out of situations with the referee. He did that on multiple times in the first half and did it after 5 minutes in the game, you know, basically elbowing Sandoval in the throat and getting away with it. He didn't even get a yellow card yesterday. I watched that first half and think, how do you not get a yellow in that game, let alone not get sent off?
So you're telling me that Isaias talks his way out of trouble and not into it, as was the case earlier this season when he shouted Vamos in the referee's face?
Yeah. No, like, for the most part, you think about how he's able to see his way through games. Oh, yeah, he absolutely builds a rapport with the referee. And it gets him out of situations because he's a dirty player, man. He's really dirty. Like, he does, but not in an overt, like, it's not overt bastardry. Like, he does it in a really niggling kind of way. Like, you know, the ankle taps, or he'll leave his foot in on challenges and say it's, you know, it's accidental, or it was, you know, it was part of the game. I didn't, you know, I had no intent of actually hurting him or actually, you know, leaving my foot in, even though I've absolutely left my foot in that situation. Like, he does it in a really snide kind of way.
Line of upstanding moral citizen, actually secretly dirty players, and deep central midfield. I mean, I always used to get shitty with Matt Mackay when he played against my
Oh, he was another one I couldn't stand.
things he would get away with.
And the tucked in shirt as well gave him
Yeah.
gave him the idea of, you know, wholesomeness and cleanliness and being fair. Like, come on, man. These midfielders are grubs, bro. And they don't give the team anything in possession, which makes it even worse. Like, and then oh God. And the fact that Dorigo is now missing minutes because they brought this guy back, it's insane. It is insane what Adelaide are doing.
Image is everything, Ante. So it's not what you are. Welcome to our Liga.
God.
Nick, speaking of the A-League, we talk about name recognition a lot of the time, and the index was at an all-time high with Scott Wooten starting
Dropped
at
it in a
centre-back
Wellington game.
for Wellington Phoenix. Ex-Manchester United defender Scott Wooten, who hadn't seen a minute up until his start on Saturday night. What did you make of his performance?
From what I saw in the two games, especially against Victory from Scott Wooten, he's not bad. For A-League men's stands, he's not that bad. That's one thing I'll put in place. I mean, it's a surefire upgrade on what Wellington already had this season in defence, and they had a chasm with Stephen Taylor leaving in the back line this season. They were shipping goals for fun, and hey, he's stabilised things, just stabilised things just a little bit. Like, it's not a hell of a lot, but just a little bit. They looked better against Victory. I know Victory probably should have scored 2 or 3 times in that game on Wednesday night. But I mean, they do need a veteran down there. They do need a louder voice, and you know, they were talking about it when they played behind closed doors, that he was that voice, that bit of leadership they needed. So I am curious to see, as the season progresses, once he starts getting games in the legs, you know, and he comes up against better attacks, how he performs. Because I mean, playing against Adelaide, it's not necessarily the greatest sample size. Let's be real, because with that midfield and that attack, they're not going to cause you a hell of a lot of problems. But Bernardo Oliveira, man, just start him. For God's sake, just freaking start him. Like, that 45 minutes he played was great. And I want to see more.
We've got another job share. We've got another job share between Lachlan Brook and Bernardo. It's going to be great, guys. It's going to be fun. 45 each. However much Brook, from what I gather, from what I understand, he's not exactly in the best of condition coming back, and like, he's been here for a month and hasn't played a lot, you know, and even now he's not playing a lot of football. You know, he's not really seeing out 90 minutes. But I don't think we're going to see a lot of minutes with Bernardo and Brook together, let alone Iran Kunda seeing a lot of minutes on the pitch now until the rest of the season, which sucks.
Now, I hate to be one to circle like a vulture over Wellington's best players, because it seems like the rest of the league does that every off-season. But Reno Piscopo, I thought, had a very good week. Some very nice touches. In the win over Victory, there was one particular little back heel that he played in this Wellington game. I just went, oof, touch of class. And, you know, he's a Melbourne boy. You know, do any of the Melbourne clubs come calling this off-season and try and secure his signature?
They should. They should.
Well, they should, but he should be aiming higher. It shouldn't be going to Melbourne. He should be aiming to go back to Europe. He should be not aiming to be going to another Melbourne club and getting the bag at Melbourne Victory or somewhere else.
Or maybe, you know what, not even Europe. Like, well, if you think about securing the bag, Asia is a realistic destination for someone like Episcopo. So using a team that will play Asian Champions League football as a pathway or a gateway to that kind of thing, I think that's also a realistic option. And obviously Wellington are not going to be able to play Asian Champions League football. If he bypasses that, or, you know, as a means of going back to Europe, or, you know, going to Asia, you know, I think either eventuality is realistic or foreseeable. The thing about Piscopo, and that was even evident in yesterday's game, he can let you down in certain phases of attacking play, and he can be inconsistent. And his decision making can be a bit erratic. That's the thing. Probably more a better pinpointing of what makes Piscopo Piscopo. His decision making can be erratic, but there's a good player there, and there's an impactful and effective player there. The fact that Sandoval has relieved his burden, because there were moments where they were playing Ben Old on that right attacking midfielder role, even playing David Ball in that role, and like it just didn't work for Wellington. I think he has eased a lot of Piscopo's burden, and as a consequence, brought the likes of Lewis and Rufer into the game, and that was even evident against Western United how much more involved Rufer and Lewis were. I know, Teo, you're not exactly the biggest fan of Clayton Lewis, but no, look, I think that midfield works if you have two people or two players who want the ball in front of them.
All right, with that, I think we'll go to the Sunday games, which we've made it to inside 90 minutes. Look at us.
We got 15 minutes before I'm off and watching some culture, guys. So let's get this ball rolling, all right?
Pick up the pace. Mariners won, Glory won. You know, I was watching this game and thinking this has late equaliser 1-1 draw written all over it throughout the second half. And lo and behold, we did get one. Perth Glory, after, I wouldn't say barely threatening, but not altogether participating in the attacking side of things for most of the contest. Daniel Steins netted in the 93rd minute to take a point for Perth Glory after the Mariners had the chances to kill it off. Teo Pellizzeri, we haven't heard from you in a while. What did you think of this game?
Very frustrating because, again, the Mariners to give up the goal at the end like they did with one of their better players in Hall, you know, just the shallow header that doesn't clear the lines. And not to apportion blame specifically to him, because the entire defence were culpable in the conceding of that equaliser. But the Mariners have really good players. They should be putting games away. They should be winning matches and climbing up the table. I mean, when you have Orenia playing the ball he did to Cummings, who showed the strength and positional sense and the finish that he had for the goal, this is replicable. This is something that should be happening more. And I think that Central Coast, yes, they've kind of leaned into the meme of Jason Cummings in order to sell some tickets and promote the club, but I think it's legit. I think that this squad has top six potential and should be pushing up the table and should be banking wins. And that's what makes today so frustrating, that really that they've been mugged out of 2 points here.
I have bought a lot of stocks recently, like on the Jason Cummings train. I was initially skeptical, but my God, I'm sorry, I know Joey might have lost another supporter, but God,
yes,
he's a good player.
Jump
He's
on the dog.
Come coin to the moon.
He's a very, very good player. Come coin to the moon, fellas. But in terms of their last 4 games in all competitions, my God, the Mariners have been so unlucky. Like the 3-2 against Sydney FC, the FFA Cup final, the 3-3 in midweek. You know, to concede that goal by Craig Noon and then against Perth, coming unstuck with literally the last kick. Eventually, karma's got to come in their way. I know that, you know, that just a bit of good luck, because it just feels like it's not going their way. And you know what? Like the next 2 times that we're going to see them are right here. They're coming here on Saturday to play Victory again, which I think there's going to be a little bit of spice because Cummings can actually play that game, and they play Melbourne City a few days after that as well. So I think those 2 games are going to be an interesting watch, but I would not be surprised if the Mariners maybe pinch one of those. And I think eventually
I can see them getting 4 points out of 6. Absolutely.
You know,
I reckon they'll win one. They'll definitely win one.
You know how frustrating it was to see Getafe not secure a 3-3 draw in the same week that Central Coast play out a 3-3 draw? Like, I would have been absolutely loving life at that point. But I'm with Teo. They should be winning games here. Like there was that period there was that chance early in the first half as well where Orenia stretches and plays in Hatch. Personally, I think if you do play all 3 of Orenia, the Gumdog, and Moresh, I think they're going to be strong. They're top 6. They're a top 6 team.
As for Perth, Giordano Corley impressed me in patches. There was a few minutes where he and Daniel Steins were in midfield at the same time together as the sort of 2 10s. And I really enjoyed
They
the
can
way
play, man.
that Perth played in that few minute spell. I mean, Coley was substituted pretty soon afterwards, so it was a tantalising glimpse of, the kind of combination play that we saw from Ninkovic and Burgess, perhaps. But yeah, look, they've got some good young players, Perth. I don't think they've quite hit their full potential yet this season, despite the goal that they scored.
You know what? Personally, I think they finished bottom of the league, but yeah, I think we should be seeing more time with Steins and Colley together. They are remotely or relatively hamstrung with the fact that Armiento is out for the whole season. But come on, man, you shouldn't really be playing, the likes of Nick Fitzgerald and Jack Clisby on the left wing so that one of Steins and Colley can play. Like, that's just counterproductive. However much I've spoken of Steins as a vibes footballer at times, let's just see both of them together. I know Oxborough has a lot to learn as that DM. Bodnar probably looks more comfortable than he does, and
Yes,
Bodnar's probably
on the ball.
Yeah, and just from a standpoint of positioning, Bodnar looks more assured in that respect. Playing Brandon O'Neill with Oxborough to create certain reliances on other players, especially for Neroli. But yeah, Central Coast should have won that game.
Teo?
Just a question. Has anyone actually seen the Source Facebook post from which the Glory post claimed on Twitter? According to Tony Sage on Facebook, Glory will return to Perth on March 5 for a run of 10 straight home games. Has anyone actually seen the source material for this? Because I know that the Perth social media scene is actually pretty tapped in to what goes on with their team. And I know it's an ambit claim, but can we read anything into that? I think, not to distract this conversation with mention of the opening border for AFLW, but it's because all the teams and players met the triple shot vaccination mandate, whereas A-League men's are going to Tasmania instead. I mean, is this tilting at windmills, or is there something we can say about this other than relaying on that it's been put out there in the public domain?
Friend of the pod, Ben Smith, what have you got for us, mate? Help us out here, man. We're dying for some info in Melbourne, brother.
Can I just one small point? I just think it's been such a kick in the guts to Perth Glory, both their men's and women's team, that the fact that the West Coast and Fremantle women's teams can host games right now. I know there's this whole thing about the triple jab, but surely I don't know what the triple jab rate is amongst a single team or amongst A-League men's teams and A-League women's teams right now, but surely you have enough to take amongst at least 15 or 16 or, I don't know, players to take for at least a game, along with support staff. It's just really disappointing that we're still in this situation, and I just think that, again, it's preferential treatment towards one code. Just putting it bluntly. And we've seen it with the AFL last year with the finals, and we're now seeing it again. And it's like, why hasn't there been a similar setup where you can hub the players, you literally ship them to the game, and you ship them out, and you get them on a flight out?
But Nick, but also...
Ooh, that was not me.
No,
I think it was Teo.
No, Nick, I also think that the AFL, in terms of team mentality, is a lot more closely aligned to military. As distasteful as that is, whenever Anzac Day comes around, the fact that teams like the one I support, Hawthorn, go and walk Kokoda, teams, engage in.
You're a Hawks fan? Yeah, brother. Sorry, mate.
I'm shutting this down right now. No, it's not happening.
No, but my point is that as we know in Australia, the PFA was around first. They were the first players' union. They're the ones that the cricketers followed. They're the ones that all the other players' union followed. They've always been the most organised. They've always been the most successful in negotiations, even when the pool of money to negotiate for has been less as far as representing their players and their populace' interest. And it means that I don't think you can have a prevailing militaristic mindset of one in, all for one for all, in an A-League men's or women's environment. Well, for starters, the women aren't full-time professionals, so you can't do it. But I think, when you say the triple vax mandate, we don't know what the uptake is. I think we can take it as read that it is just an ingrained part of AFL culture that if you want to play this sport, you fall into line with the rest of the group. Whereas I think there is a lot more freedom of expression in football. Just a theory.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. I guess it's just frustrating that there's just this different treatment. And I just think that we've been in this pandemic for 2 years now. You should have the right protocols ready in place. If you are that worried about a potential outbreak to come from a traveling team, and you could, get players into quarantine, get them to the game, get them out of the game. Like, we've been through this situation before. Hell, we even had health ministers saying, don't touch the ball, it's poison. Like, surely we've gotten to this stage now that we can move past this, and hopefully, fingers crossed, like that, all those reports that are coming out of Perth or wherever those reports are coming from, that on March 5, that at least one of the glory teams are back, because it's just getting ridiculous now.
I think that explains the A-League's approach to coaching, by the way. I think they still think the ball's poison. So could the Sturridge experiment be going any poorer at this point? I mean, I was in the first press conference, that group Zoom call with about 70 other journalists, many of whom I've never heard of or thought they had an interest in covering football at all. It was the crazy hype train at the start. He was on the project. Everyone was so excited. We were meanwhile concerned trolling about how on earth they were going to get the ball to him. But he's barely played, and I just don't see a world in which he suddenly makes a triumphant return and makes a huge impact on the league, because even when he has got on the pitch, he hasn't looked remotely fit. It's just left me a little bit empty, and I imagine, Tony Sage is probably, looking at the zeros on the end of Sturridge's contract with a lot of regret now.
I think the only regret is that they haven't been able to play at home and that they haven't been able to fill stadiums or put bums on seats with Sturridge. I don't think there's any.
Yeah, but they
regret.
did it once and he played 7 minutes. If that had continued, that pattern of him failing to contribute, do you think they would have sold out HBF Park every week? I doubt.
No, because it would have been a sugar hit.
Off.
It would have been a sugar hit. But do you think that would matter for someone like Sage?
Well, I mean, it would matter after the third
You can stay
or
silent
fourth
on this one, Nick.
home game and you stopped selling all those tickets.
Can I make the case that at least shouldn't we judge this on what Sturridge says when he leaves, because it's kind of like Marcus Babbel tipping the bucket after the exit. If Sturridge leaves and either doesn't say anything or says it was difficult but Perth took great care of him, at least that's a magnet and street credit for Perth Glory when they go and negotiate for the next one. And I think whether, it's the more zany ones like being attached to Zlatan or the more realistic ones like signing Daniel Sturridge, if his exit is handled well, whenever that may be, at least they can say that it was a net positive because it might help them land a player of similar caliber and stature and profile into the future. That's a very positive spin on what is obviously a really bad situation.
That's bleak, Teo. We've gone into damage limitation territory on the reputation of the league from this signing, let alone.
But here's the thing. What else?
Bro, we had Usain Bolt playing
Keske,
for Central Coast, man. Like, we couldn't get any worse from there.
Since Keske Honda, we haven't really had anyone else to pin our colours on. So, the years keep passing. The border situation remains incredibly difficult. Yeah. Toivonen, yes, great shout. Toivonen too.
Who knows, guys? Maybe Zlatan will come next season with that as the replacement out of contracts. Who knows? Maybe it might finally happen. I mean, how long ago was that? Was that 2019 when there were weird rumours going around that
he was leaving the Galaxy, yeah?
Yeah, and then he ended up signing for Milan instead. Jesus Christ. That feels like a time.
What a time.
I don't forget those press conferences when they were even asking other coaches about it.
As soon as we bring up Zlatan, that's my cue to move on. So Brisbane 3.
Carlton starts in a minute. Let's go.
So Brisbane Roar finally get that result that I think their play has at times deserved this season, beating Macarthur 3-1 in the pouring rain at Redcliffe. Ante, you've been high on Brisbane's potential all season. Did you see them inching closer to realising it in this one?
I'm not surprised. Let me just say, for starters, I'm going to keep it succinct, that I'm not surprised Brisbane's two best performances this season have come with Akbari and Simon in midfield together. They had a much more flexible manner in which they played. Realization is going to be, obviously a difficult thing for them because we were able to see that in the first half because, we had Newcastle vibes where they totally outplayed MacArthur and didn't truly translate that onto the scoreline. But they dominated MacArthur, in largely the majority of the game. Like MacArthur were really bad. But yeah, I'm intrigued to see if now after 2 games where, Brisbane have actually been quite good with Ekbari and Simon in midfield, whether it continues with that.
So my question is about the MacArthur defence. Ante, you were always an advocate for the fact that there would be a regression to the mean at some point or another. To get caught cold from kickoff, concede after 62 seconds, the way that they did in this game, it set the tone. And a fantastic night for the NPL brand, by the way, with Moon winning as coach and Hoare scoring the goal. Fantastic. But what does it say about MacArthur, tonight's defensive showing and tonight's performance? Because there was being cut open, but then there was the third goal, which was just a scrappy, ugly mess.
The third goal had a lot to do with Brisbane defensively and how they were able to win the ball back quickly after losing it. And talking about the relationship between attack and defense, because initially Ekbari wins the ball, then plays a combination to get Demi going at. Can't remember which defender it was to get into the penalty area. But then Demi loses the ball after he tries to cut the ball back. De Silva, obtains possession, and then Hoare's immediately onto him. There's no help from anyone in that respect for De Silva. They lose the ball from there, and then chaos ensues. But I think that third goal. Like, if you're Warren Moon, I'd be really happy, irrespective of how Brisbane scored that goal. But the fact that they were able to get into that kind of situation as a consequence of that however much we don't want to be passion merchants, on this podcast, but desire. You got a bleeping die out there to use a Warnickism. But I think Brisbane were really good, and it's no surprise why.
Well, from Warnock to Pulis, starting with 4 centre-backs in this game, Nick. I mean, is Ante Milicic showing his true colours? Was he a football terrorist all along?
Potentially. Not potentially, definitely. I mean, what was it last week that we said? What was it that we said last week, Ante? It was the 3 games that we're going to give him post the COVID break to really work out, give him that bit of leeway just to sort of build up and get themselves back into rhythm and everything else. I think that was enough for me to say that this team are not a top 6 team. They're far from it. They are so imbalanced in so many different areas. Defensively, in midfield, up top. I can't come up with any excuses for this team. I really can't, other than the fact that this is just such a poorly put out team, and I don't even know what they're doing. Like what is the plan here, fellas? What is the plan?
Get the ball to Davila and De Silva. Let them try to figure stuff out, and then we'll go from there. That's it.
It's like there was a movie kicking and screaming, kicking to the Italians.
Yeah, basically.
They were taking one touch and hot potatoing it on. They didn't know what to do. Yeah. There is no.
Oh yeah, because we forget. Remember, guys. No dribbling on the Milicic
One touch,
team.
2 touch.
1 touch, 2 touch. Quicker.
Yeah.
Can't play like that, guys.
Like, this team should be fun, and it's just not. Like, the talent they've got in their books, it should be at least a good team to watch, whether or not anybody cares enough to watch them. Whether or not they can draw a crowd, they should at least be putting a good product out. And, I mean, it comes back to simple things for me. This is simplistic analysis, but Craig Noon playing on the right-hand side for 95% of the season when you don't have an overlapping right fullback to give you width. Like, what do you think is going to happen? He's running to cul-de-sacs. Like, it's basic stuff. I mean, if I can work this out on Football Manager 2022, then surely Ante Milicic can.
At least in the 3 who could whip it in, but go for it, Teo. Sorry.
No, just on MacArthur. Has Nick Stoll finally met his match in the form of a MacArthur fan reached out to him and now he's conspicuous in his absence tonight? Should we be worried? I even saw he increased the antagonism on Twitter midweek and didn't lure in a single reply. He dangled his line out there and no one was biting at all.
For whom does the cowbell toll? Perhaps Nick Stoll.
Time marches on this podcast.
And so must we to A-League women. I think it's...
Are we saying goodnight to Nick?
I'm gonna head off, fellas.
No, you're staying on. You're staying on. You can watch. You can multitask.
All right, I'll see the background. I was gonna say one thing about A-League women's. Teo, I don't know what you were watching. I know you were commentating the game, but I thought Alex Chidiac played a really good game yesterday from being there in person. Yeah,
it's funny. I haven't copped any specific feedback on my approach to commentating the game. Is my bar for Alex Chidiac just so ridiculously high?
No.
That I graded her harshly yesterday. Well, no, because I said on air it wasn't her most prominent performance, and I've been told that I may have had that opinion at 4:20, such as its inappropriateness. So I'm none the wiser. I mean, I was commentating the damn game, and now I'm not even sure if what it was before my eyes was real. And Josh, are you about to steamroll through me here?
No, I would just say that when you're commentating, I think it actually, I don't know if you agree, Teo, but you're so focused on who has the ball that sometimes you miss what actually happened on the pitch. Not you specifically. I mean commentators in general, myself especially, when I'm doing NPL games. Sometimes when I go back and watch stuff that I've done, I notice things that I really didn't notice in the moment because I was too focused on player identification. But maybe in the big leagues you're past that. You can have.
No. I think it's a great point. No. I think it's a very fair point because I thought Kyra Cooney-Cross had her best game of the season by some distance. But
Jeff Hopkins, friends of the pod.
No, maybe it's easy for me to say because she had 2 assists, another pass which wasn't an assist because the defender touched it, but it was all but an assist. And then scored a goal herself by basically picking off a defensive lapse and stealing the ball basketball style to run down the court, So I don't know. Maybe I was caught up in the momentum of Victory scoring 3 times in 10 minutes, but I thought it was quite a game from Chids, and clearly people who watched without needing to commentate it thought that I was dead wrong. And you know what? I've been dead wrong on a couple of things this season, so I'm happy to concede.
The thing about Chidiac and Chidiac at Melbourne Victory is you have to interpret her performances within the prism of what she has to provide for the collective. So at a base level, she's still going to, be responsible for what a lot of her teammates do. So, it's not, you can't necessarily say they have bad performances because of how much they're responsible for. However, personally, I think she was pretty good, and you can't help but suspend that kind of performance with what the Matildas did a couple of weeks ago.
I mean, to be fair, I wasn't going to make game by game specific points this week because has there been a goal in Serie A, gentlemen?
Or
Topolo League, andiamo.
Attaccare!
And I wasn't going to make any game-by-game specific points in the A-League Women's this weekend, not just because we've got games coming on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, so they're all a bit of a moot point in a very short turnaround, but also because I really think this week was maybe a bit of a warning sign for what's coming in the future if and when the league increases its length. Let's not forget, the competition used to be 10 games for the first 3 seasons. Then it increased to 12. So we already have 3 of the teams on game 11 already, which means that some of them would, under normal circumstances, have been going into their final game of the season. But this year we're at 14 games for the first time. And I just wonder if the gap between the haves and the have-nots and the ones trying and the ones trying to get by is only going to be exacerbated in these final rounds of the season. And then if the competition extends in length in the future, is that only going to become even greater? Because we've seen a team score 8 today in Adelaide against Brisbane. We saw Victory win 5-0 against Wanderers and more or less put the cue in the rack at the 63-minute mark. So that could have been, if Victory had known that Adelaide were going to come out and score 8 the next day, because goal difference does matter for those 2 teams. They're battling each other directly for spots on the table. So Adelaide actually bridged their gap to Victory's goal difference by winning by a differential of 6 today, after Victory had won by 5 the day before. So Victory might now live to regret not going on with it. And we've seen other lopsided scorelines this season, not to the same extent, but I am worried that we're going to see more and more of them to finish this season. Hopefully, that is the lasting impression that is left with teams in order to act on it through the very lengthy off-season, because I would hate to think that we get to game 10 or 11 next campaign, and that's when we start to see the 6s, the 7s, and the 8s appear, but we're only halfway through the season, and teams have to front up for 11 more games of this sort of punishment. So I think let's just put a little pin in this weekend's action, and hopefully it will be something that teams remember, even if they weren't the sides on the end of the one-sided results this weekend, as indicative of what needs to happen into the future.
Teo, are Victory any close to figuring it out, so to speak? I mean, they've got a new centre half, which is very, very important. But with their stacked squad at the start of the season, I was expecting them to steamroll the league, essentially, and be right up there as contended for the title. And they've had quite a mixed campaign. Did you see anything in that 5-0 performance to suggest that they can win this thing in the finals? Or was it simply a case of, I guess, inferior opposition flattering them?
They were playing against a team that has scored 3 goals in 10 games. That's the answer. There is no pretension of a goal threat in their opposition, unfortunately. And my heart breaks for the players that are going through this each week, because they didn't construct the squad. And to be honest, my heart breaks for Catherine Cannoli, because if this is her introduction to A-League women's coaching, I feel as though that she hasn't been put in a position to succeed. And I don't think there is a combination of the players that they've got on their books that can do anything against the top teams. Maybe they could have got more out of their matches against some of the other teams around them on the table. I mean, we very legitimately have a 4, potentially 5-team battle now to avoid the wooden spoon. And then we have a 5-team battle for the top 4 spots on the table. There's a clear divide of now 9 points in the competition between 5th and 6th. And the teams from 6 down could still end up last, and the teams from 5th up can still all play finals. So are Victory getting closer? No, because Kayla Morrison is high tide. She lifts everyone around her. And Brooke Hendricks has been good, but she's not Kayla Morrison. I don't think she's actively making other players in the defense better. I don't think she's making other players actively better in their own roles on the pitch, because they have the trust and security of knowing Kayla Morrison's in defense. Brooke Hendricks is going to grow into an important part of this team, but it's going to have to happen quickly, because they lose Claudia Bunge to international duty and they play Sydney FC on Wednesday night. The only little caveat is Sydney has not been on an aeroplane this season. So this is the first time that they're actually going to go interstate in game 11 of the campaign.
Wow. Leaving on a jet plane, Sydney FC.
To be fair, that is also because Victory on the 25th had to request postponement due to COVID cases. So it could have happened after game 8 as opposed to after game 10.
Kyra Cooney-Cross, I think she's a winger. I've been unsure on her position for a little while now, but I think her best attribute is taking on defenders in those 1v1 scenarios.
PMP.
And, yeah, I mean, well, she's very skillful as well. She's a great dribbler, so especially in open spaces. So I was happy to see her drift out wide in that one. Teo, last one before we wrap this whole thing up. Wellington getting their first ever win, albeit it was against Canberra United, who've also struggled this season. But was that an important milestone in, I guess, the progression of that program? Because expectations were rock bottom for Wellington coming into this season.
Yeah, look, it wasn't just important for Wellington. It was equally important for Canberra. I mean, because Wellington are doing what they've done, living away from home, out of university dormitories, with players who are collectively having to make huge sacrifices and be super disciplined. It's basically like a 14-week college road trip, this, for like a college team in the United States being away from home for 14 weeks. Only, they had to suspend players for off-field discipline, albeit only one of them was a starting regular in the starting 11. But I feel as though the collective buy-in of the Phoenix team has very much been, sort of quasi-national side away from home. And then for Canberra, who I honestly thought Canberra were going to win. I thought that Heyman and Sykes were going to have the speed and the smarts to get around a defence that has been impressive but error-prone at times this season. And Canberra dropped their dropped their heads after the second goal, I would say. They still had chances at 1-0 down. And all credit to Wellington for winning, but Canberra have now got Western Sydney Wanderers on Tuesday night, and they are trying to avoid a winless season, which is extraordinary to say. We've touched on Canberra before, how they were a standard bearer in the past, but they've fallen on hard times this season, and Western Sydney Wanderers will be desperate not to be leapfrogged on the table because they know that if they lose to Canberra, there's a very realistic chance they end up with a wooden spoon.
Well, I think we'll leave it there. There is sleep to be had and culture to be watched, and we're not going to get the full attention span of Ante and Nick for any longer. Look at that. We got through 2 topics in the first hour while Joey was here, and then 6 topics in the next 50 minutes when he was gone. I don't know. Is he putting a handbrake on this podcast? I'll leave it to the listeners to decide.
I have 2 things to say.
Okay.
Josh,
Is this going to take
Josh,
us over 2 hours?
No,
That's ruined
no,
my trial
no. It's going to be short. It's going to be sweet. Josh, number 1 host. I don't think it's any. I don't think now there's any conjecture to be had about this. 2, happy 111th birthday to the greatest club in the world of football, my beloved Hajduk Split. I don't care if you believe I'm a Euro snob. I love you. Happy birthday. We're the best. And everyone else.
Don't worry, Ante. Going down with you in the Euro snob fan. I'm literally watching Milan during an A-League podcast. So don't even worry about it.
Top of the league.
And with
Top
that,
of the league.
it's time for us to split. Done in under 2 hours. How about that? Thank you, Ante. Thank you, Teo. Thank you, Nick. And thank you for watching or listening. We'll speak to you again next week.
Ciao a tutti.